here today at NCALT, the National College for Applied Learning Technologies based at the College of Policing. I'm here today to meet Vikesh Tailor, one of the e-learning producers. So Vikesh, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
I'm an e-learning producer here at NCALT. As an e-learning producer, I work closely with designers, developers and instructional designers. We developed e-learning predominantly for the police forces across the UK.
Explain to me about NCALT and what it is that NCALT does.
NCALT's a collaboration between the College of Policing and the Metropolitan Police. We provide training to 43 Home Office forces.
And how did you get to be an e-learning producer?
Right, I studied multimedia computing when I was at university, so I was always interested in applying my skills in usability, HCI predominantly, and using all forms of media. An opportunity came up to become a developer at NCALT, so I started off here as an ActionScript developer, working closely with the teams to produce Flash ActionScript based e-learning. I then moved to become an instructional designer, actually working with subject matter experts and stakeholders to write the content for our courses. And for the last 4 years, I've been an e-learning producer, having responsibility over several projects, working with several teams at the same time.
It's quite unusual going from being a developer to being a designer. How did that come about?
I was always interested in having greater control over the project. As a developer, although it's a collaborative process, you didn't have as much control as, say, an instructional designer or a producer in what goes into the content and what the users want. And coming from a HCI background, my interest was always on what the users wanted and to deliver to their needs. So moving from a development background to an instructional design and production background gave me more scope for using the skills that I had.
Are there any particular advantages of having been a developer?
I think it's been advantageous, especially as a producer, where you're working with timelines and you're working with different people with different skill sets. I often find sometimes there's a bit of friction between technical people and non-technical people. Coming from a development background gives me an understanding of the constraints that they're working with and also how long it would take. And I can then weigh up the options as a producer and decide which path to take.
In e-learning, we tend not to have much of a direct relationship with our end users, the learners. How important do you think that is?
I think it's vital always to focus on the users. I'm a big advocate of user-centered design, and to try and understand what their needs are. We often, for example, try to carry out ethnographies with our users to understand in which environment would they be taking this e-learning. Some of our officers will be busy on 8-hour shifts and maybe taking the e-learning course at, say, 2 AM in the morning. So it's important to understand where they're coming from, put yourself in their feet and design for their needs. So that helps inform the decisions we take when we design our products.
You used the term ethnography. What do you mean by that?
In the context that I used it, I meant actually going to visit our users in force as they're carrying out their daily activities, to understand what pressures they're under and how they approach taking an e-learning course. And what we could do by understanding what constraints and pressures they were working with is to design to fit the way they approach the e-learning.
You're an exponent of the agile design and development process. How does that work?
Sure. Agile is a project management methodology, and we found it quite useful, especially when used for projects with tight deadlines and strict budgets. So, for example, we would hold scrums, which are daily meetings not more than 15 minutes long with our team. We would have sprints, which are targets. So, for example, you might say complete chapter 1 by the end of week 1. And using these sorts of tools helped us use an iterative process to designing our e-learning. It also helped engage the stakeholders early on. So we made sure that we were on track and made sure that we were on message. At the end of every sprint, we would send out a link to the product that we had, the prototype that we had in place, and it would give them an opportunity to feedback.
Does that mean that ADDIE is no longer applicable to e-learning?
I think it's still applicable. With Agile, as I said, it's more of a project management methodology where it allows you through iterative design to make sure that you're on track and to keep coming back and improving on the previous design.
But surely with ADDIE, you're following a sequential process and it's not really possible to go back. How does that fit in with an iterative model?
Well, I think you can have an overall approach to a project using ADDIE, and then when you come to the production of the e-learning, where you're getting the developers, the designers and the writing in place. For example, on one of our projects, we didn't have all the information in place and the deadline was coming up soon. We found that using Agile on the production side helped immensely because it allowed us to be flexible in the approach to building our courses.
Thanks. So perhaps you could now show us some of the projects you've been working on at NCALT.
Okay, so first example I want to show you is for one of the Olympic modules that we created. And as soon as you come into the course, you're approached with a help screen that guides any user who's not familiar with e-learning before. The use of high-profile figures on the Olympic packages was also helpful because it gave authenticity to the package. This, along with a tie-in with LOCOG and their branding team, helped us to achieve a product that looked like it was in keeping with the Olympic style and design. A project that we launched recently was managing police finances. We used an interesting screen type for this to get across a lot of facts and a lot of technical detail quite quickly, but also helping the user to absorb that information through the use of animation. Because you had users coming in at varying degrees of knowledge, we had an assessment, and whether you passed this course or not was based on the score for this assessment. So if you knew what you were talking about, you could go straight into the assessment, achieve the pass mark and print your certificate. There was also a blended learning approach to this, where you would take your certificate to a classroom course and then study the learning objectives in more detail. As part of the course, we also had a glossary. This would be referred to in a classroom course as well. So for the first time, we developed a mobile web app which users could then take into course and access their glossary while they were learning in the classroom.
So thanks, Vikesh. It's been fascinating to take a look at some of the projects you've been working on, but also to have the benefit of your unique perspective on design. I wish you all the best for the future.
Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.